This is The Open Podcast, where your host, Sander Mangel, and his guests share strategies and insights to help digital agencies thrive in a changing world. In this episode, Sander talks with Martin Harris, head of digital at Tank, a digital marketing and PR agency.
How do I rank in ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and all the rest? GEO is the hot topic of the moment. I caught up with Martin Harris, head of digital at Tank, a UK agency, after their webinar on AI visibility. There's a lot of noise in this space right now, and we're going to try to cut through it. What we'll cover today is GEO versus SEO, what's actually different, how to prepare your content for LLM, and how to actually measure the indexation and why that is still a mess. So with no further delay, let's get into the conversation. So one of the most frequent questions I'm getting at the moment, number one, is how do I get into ChatGPT or some variation of that? How do I rank in GEO? Where do I upload my feed or something along those lines? I think it's safe to say that there is some mystery around GEO or at least ranking and what have you. And I'll be very honest here, at times I'm even mystified. Martin, can you shed some light on this poignant question?
Yeah, well, I can try. I think the industry as a whole is in a bit of a confusing state at the moment. I think that's predominantly because there's a lot of unanswered questions, both from Google and the LLMs themselves. GEO, in its traditional form, is generative engine optimization. And that's ultimately trying to rank better within large language models such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. But I think a lot of the time the industry is confusing what the standard or fundamental SEO practices and also broader GEO tactics. We don't have all the answers. I think a lot of the time the people in the industries are doing their own research and they're trying to do their own experiments and trying to understand exactly what's going on. And we're leaning on those people a bit more, and then everyone's finding out a bit more information. And it's likewise for us at Tank in that we are trying to experiment and we are doing what we know is working at the moment. So I don't think there's a definitive answer, but ultimately we've done some tried and tested methods and it seems to be working for our clients. So we're taking it from that angle.
Yeah, and stop me if I'm completely off the mark here, but it feels to me that most of these companies are also making it up as they go along. And with that, I mean the ChatGPTs and the Perplexities and what have you, right? Apart from Google with Gemini, they're all relatively new to this. They know how a basic crawler should work and what have you, but I think they are still also experimenting with their approach. I do think that it does change daily. To some extent, it feels that we have been spoiled with Google that has been in this field for a long time and had kind of an approach, a communication channel, and what have you. But we're back to the Wild West.
Yeah. So I think the competition is a good thing in that Google has dominated for so long, in that it's nice that we're shaking things up a little bit. The LLMs are always updating. Sometimes they get things wrong. I read a stat the other day that I think the New York Times ended up doing a post on AI review. So even Google apparently are getting it wrong 10% of the time, which is wild. But outside of that, that's Google, who have tried and tested 28 years worth of experience trying to get things right. You can only imagine ChatGPT, Claude, they might get it wrong more often. The LLMs themselves will always go to search as well. So if you're not ranking in search, then you'll not actually get cited anyway. So it's a little bit chicken and egg in that you need to make sure that you're ranking still, but there are tweaks and methods you can do within LLMs to make sure you rank there as well.
Okay, so that's a good point. If you're not showing up in, let's say, Google or what have you, then there's a good likelihood that you're also not being crawled by the LLMs.
Yeah, there's actually conflicting data on this. There's two stances. So that the stance that we've taken from the research that we've read is that if you're not ranking in the first 20 positions within Google, then you're not going to get cited by an LLM. Then Ahrefs did a study at the start of this year where they said that 88% of brands which are mentioned across LLMs are not within the top 10 of Google search results. So that would suggest that it doesn't necessarily need to be, you don't need necessarily to be ranking well in order to get featured in LLM, which then begs the question, what do people need to do differently in order to rank in these platforms if it's not through search? We have an approach, and our approach is working at the moment. And at least from what we're tracking and what we're seeing, and getting featured more frequently. And I'm sure lots of people have a different approach as well. I think if we're taking it down to the fundamentals in SEO, and this is where I think there's a lot of debate within the industry at the moment in regards to isn't just what people are doing on GEO standard SEO. And I think the answer is yes, but also no, in that the specific GEO tactics I see it as like compartmentalized SEO. So they're SEO tactics, which everyone should be doing anyway. So if you go through the list, which people typically tick off as GEO, which is freshness, make sure your content's up to date, making sure that you have original and fresh data, you have structured markup on those pages. There's an element of the type of content. So best of listicles is working very well at the moment, albeit a little bit spammy in terms of how people are manipulating that. And
the top 5 reasons too.
Exactly. And also competitor comparison tables. So all these things are essentially, good SEO, right? And this is what people would recommend that you do. But we also know within that is what LLMs love, and that is information which they can get with ease. And they can scrape it without having to go through reams and reams of data. As ultimately, LLMs are going to try and do, like the majority of these platforms, they're going to try and do it in the most efficient way possible because they want to save on energy, they want to save on memory, and that ultimately means getting that information first. And alongside that as well, I read the other day around how if you look at Web Core Vitals, typically how you would usually rank within SEO, you need to make sure you have good page speed. But when Googlebot visits your site, if it's under 10 seconds it takes for the page to load, Google won't mind that. However, an LLM, from what I've read, if it takes over 2 seconds for that for the server to load your website, then it won't read it and it won't use it.
All right,
in that example, you've got two very different examples of optimization. You've got optimization where you know that your site needs to be as efficient as possible rather than just being okay like you would for Google. And then the type of content that you put together also needs to be structured in a way that's a lot more easier for an LLM. So I think you're comparing a sophisticated model in Google and an unsophisticated model in LLM in terms of getting that data. So in the unsophisticated example, you're optimizing it so it can get that information as easy as possible. So you're still optimizing a web page exactly like you would for SEO, but I think you are going a step further for an LLM. That's the differentiator for me.
It almost sounds like we're going 4 years back where Google didn't know how to handle single page applications, didn't know how to handle JavaScript.
Yeah.
Everything needed to be plain text, basically printed on the website, as easy to crawl as possible.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And these LLMs could get more sophisticated, and it might not need these things. The way that we're positioning it to clients is ultimately there are these tactics at the moment. However, it's a very short-termism approach. So we can create a best of list. I would be against that from a broader marketing perspective in general, but we can create it and we know that you would rank well. And we actually brought in an external consultant the other day to discuss this, and their standpoint on it was, well, if you are the best in the industry and you can back that up with data, with reviews, testimonials, everything that will say that you're best in that product, then why not would you put a list together to say that you're top? It's genuine, and that approach I think is absolutely fine. I think the grey area, or the area where I'm a bit uncomfortable with, is where people would put a list together and they just put themselves top regardless of if they are or a subject opinion that they think they are anyway.
That's maybe a good segue, right? With Google, we used to say, okay, write it for a human being. So a lot of storytelling, a lot of playing into the emotions, that kind of stuff. And then Google will kind of take that and use that to then send traffic to your website, right? And it seems that has fundamentally shifted, where it's much more, if I look at the way I look for stuff on LM, it's very much what is the best way, or compare me this and that. It's much more in a question, I'd like to say. So what is the best way to kind of shape that content? And is that just content pages, or should you be multi-leveling, diversifying, looking at other mediums as well?
I think that in terms of the structure of content, it goes back to what we discussed before, and that's structured data, fresh data, original data. But there is, of course, optimizations that is more longer tail question and answer, which we can optimize for. So if just for example's sake, if you had some really good content and the page had more FAQs and those FAQs could be expanded on, then that can be mocked up with structured data, and that is easier for the LLM to kind of pull that through. If you're just answering a quite a generic question, then that in itself is not really super helpful. It needs to be quite unique. And then the layer above that is that element of reputation and trust. So the LLM will be quite lazy. It will go to search. It will go to different platforms to get that information. And then obviously as a retrieval layer, it will get that information and spit it out as an answer. But in order for it to make recommendations, it needs to have an element of trust within that. And then that means that you need to have good reputation, which could be in the form of reviews. It could be the form of a strong brand across multiple platforms. It could be in the form of authorship and individuals who are experts in their field, which again I know overlaps with EEAT, but ultimately, and again that's where the LLMs is trying to understand its trust. So it kind of goes above and beyond the content in that you can get additional information out, but if you are not a reputable source to begin with, then it won't use you as a reference.
That's a good point. So is it fair to say that it's much easier to rank as the premier brand for paper clips in Luxembourg than to rank with one specific product detail page for my new and improved paper clip?
Yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, that's kind of been the case for a while with Google as well. But if you are a big brand, it's still heavily weighted towards you. I have seen, though, to be fair, we have some of our clients, for example, who aren't the market leader. They don't have a strong brand as other competitors, and they are being cited alongside them. So when there's someone's asked for a comparison of products they wanted to use, they're being featured. I do think there is more opportunity for the SMEs, the smaller brands, but both Google and LLMs will always favor the more reputable brand. So you can compete, but the bigger companies will still win.
Right. And would it then help you can of course have fresher data, right? Improve your data more often, update your pages, your FAQ, your about us page for all I care. Does it help to maybe take a different stance than the big brand? So maybe have a different voice than they have so that you show up in comparison?
Yeah, I think that's why you can win is differentiation or making sure that you really hone in on the positioning that you wanted to do. If you are all things to everyone, and if you're like the paperclip company, and I'm not sure if you have this where you're from, there's Staples or just something similar where you're going to get a big brand and they offer lots of different products and services. Yeah, you're going to really struggle to compete against the big brands. If you are, everything that you're known about is super personalized, super specific to an industry, and you've got a reputation and reviews all about that specialism in that particular area, then yeah, you can be successful.
So it pays off, unless you're the 3M of this world, it pays off to be more boutique, more authentic.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. How, and maybe coming back to the differentiating in the kind of content, is it just on my website, or would I be wanting to look at different platforms as well? Right, back in the day we did everything for a backlink for Google. Is that still the case? Do I need those backlinks? Do I need recommendations from another website, maybe a mention?
Yeah, so that's twofold. So backlinks and offsite reputation for SEO, because as we know, more than likely, if you are ranking well in search, then you will rank well in LLMs. But externally, yeah. So as part of that, you could have featured in media. So a lot of media will often be cited in LLM. So that'd be a brand-based mention, which will be helpful in its own regard. So Forbes, a TechCrunch, for example, if your client is mentioned in those, then more likely that the LLM will crawl from that. I did actually read that some major publication sites, such as Forbes, actually have a direct relationship with OpenAI. So rather than having to wait for the page to load and have that, the potential issue of not being indexed, I think they've got a direct API to OpenAI. So all that live feed information, news information, will automatically get pulled through. So they're already at an advantage if you are getting featured in these media sites.
They're fast tracking the indexing there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then on top of that as well, as we know, Reddit has been heavily cited across the majority of LLMs, albeit that's slightly declined more recently. And I know people have tried to get into Reddit, and I think a lot of the original Redditors have seen this, and if they've noticed that if brands are trying to get in or they're trying to mention a brand, they've just been ignored straight away, or they've not been accepted within certain communities. I think if you are posting on something like Reddit, it needs to be genuine and authentic, that you actually are providing value, then potentially you can get featured on those as well. And I've actually seen as well, more recently, LinkedIn has been heavily cited. So if you're posting original data for your own personal profile, and that's linked to a company page, for example, then that will often get you cited more often than not. So what we do at Tank as well, to kind of make it more of a full service approach or a holistic approach, which is not only going to feature help the client from a marketing perspective, but also from an LLM perspective, is thought leaders across a variety of media. And that is building up that trust signals to the LLMs, to Googlebot, that they should be cited. So then posting regularly on LinkedIn, going to major publications and very niche publications talking about specific areas in their fields. All of these things is creating an element of trust across the web, but more from a search everywhere perspective. So people can find you on multiple platforms as well as an LLM.
Basically what you've already been doing all along, but just make sure you do it well, right? So make sure you build up that trustworthiness on different platforms, having independent voices citing you.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it just comes down to good marketing. I actually did a talk about this last year, and how, if you want to rank more well in AI search, it is just trying to be featured on more platforms, because you got more chance to be cited. But you can be smart with it. So media lists that we go after, for example, on the PR angle, we make sure that you can look within their robots.txt file to find out if they allow certain crawlers, right? So if they don't allow certain LLMs, then you're not going to get featured with LLMs through their website. So we can go after certain media knowing that they're more likely to be crawled by an LLM. And then a broader marketing approach, I think, is definitely the right angle when it comes to AI search.
Yeah. Okay, so it's about brand building. Is that just as a company, or is there also some opportunity for being more employee first, having your employees have a voice online, kind of them taking more the stage?
Yeah, and that's the case for SEO as well. But what we always try to do for our clients and for individuals at Tank is that element of authorship, which does, again, reinforce those EEAT signals. I think a lot of the time it's just being consistent. It's being known for a particular subject area, and then making sure that you have, again, the SEO basics, having author bios, a dedicated page which explains what you're all about and why you're an expert in that field, and then reinforcing that with original data.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's Weaviate. It's a database company, and I think half of their team has like 10,000 plus followers on LinkedIn and actively posting. I've always had a huge respect for their approach, where they really put their team first in terms of thought leadership, and nothing comes from their company profile, but it's mostly through their team, which I think is a very authentic approach.
Yeah, I mean, even just talking from a basic selling point of view, people buy from people. I think a lot of people switch off from brands on LinkedIn, so it's within their own interest to make it like employee advocates and give their employees a voice. It makes sense from multiple levels, from a marketing perspective, from an LM. Yeah, we've tried to reinforce that at Tank as well. We've got multiple people who will do the likes of this, go on podcasts. They're regularly featured in news and webinars, which I believe you attended on the other day. So yeah, it's all super helpful.
I was wondering why you said yes to this podcast recording, but here we have the answer. Wonderful. So let's say we have done everything right. Our content looks amazing. We have some serious thought leadership. How do we monitor all of this? Is it Google Search Console? Is analytics still useful? How do you know if you're ranking?
Yeah, the issue with this is that it's not great at the moment. The tools that we have, nothing's 100%. And I think that's ultimately because of the way that LLMs are set up, first and foremost. So every single person who goes to an LLM, there'll be an element of personalization, previous data, and everyone will search in a completely different way. So actually tracking specific prompts is going to be very hard. Rand Fishkin at Spark Toro did some original research for this, where he tried to get people to do 100 different searches. He tried to get 100 people to do searches, and every single one of them searched differently. So when it comes to tracking specific prompts, it's impossible to try and. And then on top of that, you've got the added complexity of how the LLMs operate and how they're cited. So a lot of LLMs might only do a brand mention, and then someone might then go back directly through search and go to your brand that way. So it's trying to close that gap from a full funnel perspective. And then if you do get cited and then linked, then great, we can track that through direct referrals. But that only kind of tells part of the story, because someone could be chatting within the actual LLM itself for weeks before it even mentions that brand. So you don't have the full context of what the whole conversation was originally. So there are some tools that we've been experimenting with. So we started with Peak, more recently LLM Refs, and we're soon to be experimenting with some called Wayk. A lot of SEO professionals have promoted that one, so I'm keen to try that one out, although they might be on commission, so I don't know. But a lot of these tools, I think the best thing you can do with these tools, especially when it comes to internal stakeholders, or if you work at an agency with clients, is just educate them that this is an indication, this is not fact. So this will tell you roughly against your competitors how often it feels that you're being cited. The data is not accurate. We can't use it as a 100% accurate tool to say to our clients, to say to our internal stakeholders, this is what this is doing and this is working well. There was actually a really good example. There's a woman I follow called Lily Ray, who's a brilliant SEO strategist. And do you know the old expression where a client would search for their own name and then they'll get frustrated when they're not being shown? I think most agencies have seen that, because there's no appreciation that that's not how search works. But her angle and the joke that she was making was, with personalization, if an LLM knows everything about you, then it's more likely to reference your own brand. So from a client perspective, they're probably going to be searching for their own name and they're like, oh, we're being featured quite often, but they actually don't realize that personalization is actually weighing in their favor. So yeah, I thought that was a funny approach. It's helpful for us as an agency, but also unhelpful in that it's not accurate. But beyond that, what we've just started to look into a bit more is more server-side tracking. Just for example's sake, Microsoft Clarity, once you have it, is free, by the way, so long as you're happy to part with some of your data. You can track bots visiting your site. So if an LLM has visited a certain landing page lots of times, and you know that page is working well from LLMs because it's often being referenced and cited, that's probably the only accurate approach we can do at the moment. I'm sure the tools will get better as the years develop, but at the moment they're not 100% trustworthy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is it reasonable to assume that if your page gets indexed more and more often, clearly there's a demand for that information, right? They're trying to keep it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let's say I keep coming back to my paperclip company, but I'm reselling these paperclips. How do I make money from the fact that my content is being cited in these LLMs? I try to wrap my head around this, because back in the day of Google, let's say, you would get indexed, you would have that visitor on your site, right? And then they might or might not purchase. In the age of LLM, if you're just getting mentioned, or if your insights are getting mentioned without you being a brand, it seems infinitely more hard to convert, let's say, that indexation into actual revenue.
Yeah, good question. And it's hard to answer. That's a cop out, but it is. I think ultimately, because we don't have the measurement, we can't always tie back to ROI, which is difficult in any sense. I think specifically from an e-commerce perspective, there's obviously additional things we can look at in that. ChatGPT now, you can upload direct product feeds to that, which will then hopefully get you cited more often, both from an organic and from a paid perspective. What we are seeing, at least from a Google perspective, is that Google shopping grids, organic Google shopping grids, are dominating. So what I would advise the majority of e-commerce store is actually to focus on that first, because that's where you can really win and you can actually measure it properly. On the AI side of things, again, I think it's just having that broader marketing approach, that you're doing the SEO fundamentals, you've got a good brand reputation and trust. And then along with that, you will be featured more often. And then you should hopefully have more referrals from the LLMs themselves, and you can see that within your analytics, and you can put a direct revenue figure against it. In regards to people searching for your name and you've just been cited, you've not had a direct link reference, there's an element of tying that back together with brand. So if you have an increase in brand searches, for example, because people have found you originally from somewhere else, then that you can tie that up. Yeah, I haven't answered your question properly, but hopefully I've given it a different angle.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, in the last half hour, what I've heard mostly is build a brand, right? If you are reselling a product that is a commodity, make sure that you are the predominant expert on that product, more or less.
Yes.
Be authentic. Maybe take a somewhat edgy stand on that product. Make sure that you stand out. Make sure that the basic hygiene of having a fast website. Make sure your content is easily indexable, right? All those basics need to be covered. And most of all, there is no easy way of doing it. It sounds like a lot of hard work that you need to do at the end of the day.
Yes, I think that the main takeaway for SEOs, and I think this is part of the reason why there's a lot of debate within the industry at the moment, is they're solely looking at it from an SEO point of view. And I think they're right. GEO is SEO if you're only looking at SEO. But I think GEO and LLMs and even Google today is much bigger than that. It's UX, it's social, it's PR, it's digital PR, it's the bigger brand reputation that you have around the web. All of this will play into both traditional search and LLMs. And I think that's where people need to change their mindset when it comes to this. And I think they'll start to see some good results as a consequence.
I think that's a good note to leave it with. Martin, thank you so much for giving us some insights here. Again, lots to do, a lot of hard work, but definitely sounds doable.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.